Good morning. I'm the Reverend Molly Housh Gordon, minister of this congregation. It's so good to see you all together this morning. We provide visual descriptions of ourselves as speakers at the pulpit to be accessible for visually impaired and blind folks in our congregation. And I am a woman with pale skin and a long red ponytail wearing a tweed pantsuit with not too many sequins on it. I have a really brief announcement for you this morning that I hope we will all find exciting, which is that First Sunday potlucks are coming back. Starting next week, the first Sunday in February, we will be holding a potluck lunch after the service, the first Sunday of each month. We invite you to bring a dish to share, be ready to help set up and clean up the sanctuary, and break bread and build community together. We look forward to being able to be together in this way after many years of whatever these last few years have been. And my second brief announcement is to share that today, or actually yesterday, was the anniversary, the birthday of our congregation, that we are celebrating Founders Day together this morning. And we do so with some opening words from the Reverend Amanda Poppy that have a responsive element. And so after each of the lines that I read, I'm going to gesture to you and invite you all to say together, "This is the home that love made." Can we try that together? This is the home that love made. All right. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love that our founders felt when they planned out these walls and raised these beams above us. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of all who have worshiped here over years, those who have celebrated and grieved here, the babies dedicated, couples married, and family members mourned here. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of our children as they learn and laugh together, and our youth as they grow into their own sense of purpose and meaning. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of the staff who have served it, full of their hopes for our congregation, their hard work and acts of dedication. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of our choir and all our musicians, love made clear in the voices lifted here on Sunday mornings. This is the home that love made. It is full of the love of our volunteers who make everything about our life happen together, tangible acts of service every week, every day. This is the home that love made. It is full of our love, the love of this community, despite differences and disagreements, the love that holds us together as a people. This is the home that love made. Can you feel it? May that love be with us always. And let us sing together our centering song, which we've been singing together every Sunday this month. It's a chant called Becoming by Mary Gregolia. The words are printed in your order of service. I invite you to rise or remain seated as you are most comfortable.
Good morning. I'm Todd Iveson. I'm your worship associate this morning. I am an older white man with very short, very receding, and very graying hair. And I'm wearing a purple sweater this morning. This morning, we gather celebrating the founding of our beloved congregation, which first met on January 28th in 1951, 72 years ago, to provide sustenance, fellowship, and hope for religious liberals in this particular part of America's Bible Belt. Our founders gathered together to have their way lit forward by the light of reason, the light of companionship, and the light of justice. They realized what we recall today, that our separate fires gathered together could kindle a warmer, stronger, more brilliant flame. We are better together, and we remember that every week when we light the flaming chalice, the symbol of our faith in the community that holds us and the bright flame of the human spirit that unites us. As I light the chalice, will you please join me in the words of affirmation printed in your order of service? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
The Reverend Dr. Carl Scoville, a beloved longtime Unitarian minister in the Boston area, tells the story of an afternoon when he was asked about church that day by a friend. "How many did you have in church today?" the friend asked. 100, answers Carl, maybe a few more, maybe a few less. And then he feels defeated because it doesn't seem like a large enough number. But over the course of the day, he continues to ruminate on the question and begins to recall the stories he knows of those who were at church that day, the connections and loves that they brought with them. And he recalls all those who have shaped and formed the community over the 20 years he has served it, although they are no longer present. And he recalls the saints of the church, those generations now gone, but upon whose care and stewardship all of it rests. And he recalls the saints of our faith who dreamed of a free religion, of conscience and hope. And he remembers the reading for that day was from Paul's letter to the Hebrews, which says, among other things, "Seeing as we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with patience the race that is set before us." And he thinks, compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses. The next day, as Carl tells it, he was asked the same question again. "How many did you have in church yesterday?" He looks them in the eye and tells a deeper truth. "Thousands," he says. Today, we mark our congregation's 72nd anniversary, and we remember a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. Those whose dreams and commitments to liberal religion in mid-Missouri created a way for us here and now. We remember the thousands who are here in this room, carried here by each of us in heart, in memory, in legacy, our own ancestors and the ancestors of our congregation and the ancestors of our traditions. Truly, we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses. And so I would like to bring that cloud of witnesses into our space together. I'd like to invite you now to stand or raise your hands group by group, and you may classify yourself as you like, of when you have joined or become a part of this congregation, whether that was decades ago or just today for the very first time. And so let us begin by thinking of those who joined our congregation in the 1950s, the decade of its founding. We recall many in memory. And I invite anyone who might be here who joined as a member or visitor in the 1960s to rise or raise your hands. Hello. And if you would remain standing or hands up so that we will all then be together in a moment, that would be lovely. And now for those who joined as a member or visitor in the 1970s, will you please rise or raise your hands? And for those of the 1980s, please rise or raise your hands. For those of the 1990s, please rise or raise your hands. For those of the aughts, the 2000s, you rise or raise your hands. And for those who joined or visited first in the 2010s, there's a big crew to rise and raise your hands. For those who joined or visited for the first time in the 2020s, will you rise or raise your hands? And for those who are here for the very first time, I invite you also to rise and raise your hand. You are an important part of this cloud of witnesses too. And now I invite you to look around the room at the beloved faces who are gathered in this place. Recall all of those who are connected to us across the decades. All those souls now gone, all those hearts we carry in our hearts, the saints of our church and of our tradition and of our lives. And I invite you to look at the faces of our children and recall forward the space we are making now for all those who are to come and to grow among us, and for all who seek and hunger for this place, even though they have not yet ever entered its walls. I invite you to think of those who are watching with us online, whether they've been here for decades or are visiting with us on their computers for the first time today. Let us feel the power and strength of this community, the many loves and dreams of our ancestors and those pulsing in our own hearts and those that await us in the years to come. We are encompassed indeed by so great a cloud of witnesses. Happy birthday, church. I invite you to sit down. For the safety and well-being of trans kids and drag performers in Missouri under attack by politically cynical extremist legislators, may they be well and surrounded in our love. And we particularly and deeply grieve this week the death of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, murdered at the hands of police. Tyree was a beautiful Black father, artist, and photographer. We remember him for the joyful fullness of his life. We grieve his death for all that his life mattered. And we lament powerfully the epidemic of police violence, brutality, and killing in our country, especially of Black men and women. We hold in our hearts all who see in Tyree themselves, their partners, their fathers, brothers, and sons. We commit our hearts and hands and lives to the work of dismantling these systems of brutality and supremacy that kill beloved bodies and that harm all of our souls. May we live the lives that will dismantle these systems, that will create a community where each person may thrive as artists, photographers, beautiful, beloved, whole people. We pray these things so fervently. We conclude in prayer with the words of 20th century Unitarian minister Vivian Pomeroy. God of the wind and sand, sun and moon, joy and beauty, loneliness and sorrow. We thank you for the magic of our human lives, often turning our drabness into gold. We thank you for the wonder of being loved, for the fidelity of friends, for the surprise of being forgiven, for the strength to forget what is not worth remembering, for the power to remember things which come more precious as the years go on. For the discovery that in the darkness there are presences which are hidden from us by the light. Love, touch into living flame again hearts that have grown weary with the weight of things. And when duty tires, grant us the love which goes gladly all the way, making of our community the world we all wish to see. Amen. And our hymn of response to this time of prayer is number 1 in your gray hymnals, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door, a blessing for a beloved community. I invite you to rise or remain seated as you are most comfortable.
Our reading this morning is from the Book of Delights by Ross Gay. Number 60, Joy is Such a Human Madness. The duff between us? Or like this, in healthy forests, which we might imagine to exist mostly above ground and be wrong in our imagining, given as the bulk of the tree, the roots are reaching through the earth below. In a healthy forest, there exists a constant communication between those roots and mycelium, where often the ill or weak or stressed are supported by the strong and surplused. By which I mean, a tree over there needs nitrogen, and a nearby tree has extra. So the hyphae, so close to hyphen, the handshake of the punctuation world, the fungal ambulances ferry it over constantly. This tree to that to this. And that in a tablespoon of rich fungal duff, a delight, the phrase rich fungal duff, meaning healthy forest soil, swirling with the living the dead make, are miles and miles of hyphae, handshakes, who get a little sugar for their work. The pronoun who turned the mushroom into people, yes it did, evolved the people into mushrooms. Because in trying to articulate what perhaps joy is, it has occurred to me that among other things, the trees and the mushrooms have shown me this. Joy is mostly invisible. The underground union between us, you and me, which is, among other things, the great fact of our life and the lives of everyone and thing we love going away. If we sink a spoon into that fact, into the duff between us, we will find it teeming. It will look like all the books ever written. It will look like all the nerves in a body. We might call it sorrow, but we might call it a union. One that, once we notice it, once we bring it into the light, might become flower and food, might be joy. Here ends the reading.
You Churchers, it is so good to be back with you after 2 weeks of study leave for my Doctor of Ministry program in creative writing and public theology. I missed you. I was overjoyed and more than a little awestruck over the last 2 weeks to get to study writing with the New York Times bestselling poet and essayist Ross Gay, whose Book of Delights has held pride of place on my nightstand for many moons. I return to it again and again. Although Todd reminded me this morning after I assigned him one of those essays to read to you that it's a little harder to deliver than it is to read on the page. And he did a beautiful job. Ross has something of a stream of consciousness habit about him. And so my classmates and I had this wildly precious week with Ross Gay, and we talked and wrote a lot in our week together, but mostly we talked about and practiced how to pay attention. This is what Ross does as a practice. Pay attention. And we talked about the most important thing in Ross's estimation, which is how to behold. And in beholding, how we be holding, how we make it a habit to hold one another. And how that is what good writing does, and that is what good community does, and that is what good living does. It beholds, it holds, it attentively embraces all the ways we are entangled by chance and on purpose. And Ross is a Black man in America who writes about racism and policing and joy and delight, and who tells us that the answer to all of it together is to attentively embrace all the ways we are entangled by chance and on purpose. And that when we rejoice in the way our lives are entangling, that is the pathway away from brutality and towards one another and towards joy. And so Ross tunes his gaze toward the delight of our entanglement, saying, there lies the pathway to what we all need, to be connected, to dismantle the systems that brutalize us. That where it starts is paying attention, delighting in the ways that we are connected with one another, delighting in the ways that we are connected with a beautiful photographer in Memphis, Tennessee, and his habit of skateboarding, delighting with the ways we are connected to the trees and the fungus in the ground outside of our building and stretching across the world. He tells us this is the pathway home for all of us. And so it was a treasure to be with him these last 2 weeks. And it is a treasure to come back to you, where we behold one another. I want to tell you this morning as we celebrate our congregation's birthday that I believe this community is a home for delight. That we are creating what is at its heart a place of beholding in every sense of the word. This is a place where we learn to pay sacred attention to one another and to the community that stretches far beyond our walls. This is a place where we learn to behold, as in paying attention, and behold, as in hold each other up, hold each other tight, hold each other steady, hold the dreams of all who have slept within these walls, hold our community in care far beyond our doors, hold the tears and the hopes of generations, hold babies dedicated to the practice of love, hold those bent over with grief. This is a place of beholding. And so today on our church's birthday, in the spirit of Ross Gay, I want to give you 3 delights of our beholding community. First, a delight that was. Years ago, very early in my ministry here, an ancestor of our church lay dying peacefully after a very long and full life. And I arrived as pastor to sit with her, to walk her home. There is no greater honor, no space more sacred, which is not to romanticize dying. Often it is just as laborious as being born, just as undignified and unruly as giving birth. Perhaps you are wondering when I will turn to delight. Delight was already there when I entered the room. Delight in the form of Scott Denson, whom many of you know and many will come to know. Scott had arrived at that bedside 20 minutes before me and was sitting with our dear ancestor on her bed. She was sleepy and drifting, and he was like a stone in the stream. She clung to his hand, and he sang. That's the delight. I walked in, and Scott Denson was there singing. And so I sat next to him in a chair and added my hand to the pile of hands and my voice to the melody. And my God, when I have to leave this world, I want it to be under a whole pile of hands with Southern harmonies. We sang Amazing Grace. We sang I'll Fly Away and Down in the River to Pray. We sang Blue Boat Home and For the Beauty of the Earth. And I swear I could feel our dear one relaxing, easing into the journey that we all will take some bright morning or quiet night. Years later, I ran into Scott at another bedside, and we sang together again, another pile of hands. And every night when I sing my children to sleep, they ask for Down in the River to Pray, and I hear Scott's voice. And I feel the power of lives releasing into mystery under steady hands. And I delight in the truth that we are here to sing each other home. And now a delight that is. Today, a child I love is suffering, and this is no delight. Last week, a new baby was born, and I will come to love him too. This wandering congregation of ours, we declare no creed, we declare nothing but a promise to walk together. And that is the delight, that those children are mine to love. They are mine to love and yours to love, not by blood or by parenting or even by specific choice. They are mine, they are ours to love by community. They are ours to behold, these children, to be holding. The delight is all the ways we weave our lives together, all the joys and hurts and all the children that are all of ours to love. and sometimes they will suffer. And this is the ache and the solace of community, that we love each other more widely than we knew possible, and thereby consent to hearts always cracking open. That we know, in the words of our ancestor Henry David Thoreau, that the only cure for love is more of it. The delight is how fully we belong to each other, and how stunning the place where our lives meet and join. It is beautiful and blinding as the spot where sun hits water and shines, a sparkle and a glare, an ache and a solace. And this is the delight we keep walking together, because we promised. And a delight that will be. When I arrived here 10 years ago, I soon met a woman who felt like kin, Roberta Jones. Many of our long-timers will remember her. She was wiry and stern-looking, like the teacher she had been, though I swear her eyes twinkled with something like moxie. She ruled over our church kitchen for a time, but by the time I knew her, she was in decline. She was pragmatic and kind and lovely. She was nothing like my grandmother and reminded me of my grandmother entirely. They were both from rural Oklahoma, red dirt in our veins. And if you were wondering why I am starting a delight that will be by telling you of one who is now an ancestor, that is my point. That everything which will be is tangled up with everything and everyone that was, and all their gifts and foibles and loves. That we are compassed about by so great a cloud of witnesses, beholding community together across time and lives. And here's the delight that will be. In a month, I will ride our new elevator for the first time. Perhaps you've seen some of the mechanical things that are down in that hole in the ground. And this is a necessity 30 years in the making, and one, if I'm being honest, Roberta might have seen as inessential, remembering those no-nonsense Oklahoma roots. I can take the stairs, even though I watched her traverse those stairs to the forum gathering with growing concern. That elevator, that tangible expression of our mission of radical welcome and our promise to live into that mission in basic and ever more complex ways, was funded by our entire congregation and community. And that included a substantial gift from Roberta and Lee Jones' estate, shared by their daughter and son-in-law, Jan and Chuck Sweeney. I never got to meet Lee, but of course I unjustly, selfishly imagine him just like my grandfather. Great Depression formed, ramrod straight, with a wicked sense of humor. And Roberta and Lee were not the type to want rooms named for them, but Lee helped maintain our buildings and grounds for years, and Chuck and Jan have humored me. And sometime around that first elevator ride, I will install the Braille sign identifying the Lee and Roberta Jones machine room right next to the elevator. The machine room with access to the rigging that will be holding us all as we journey from floor to floor, providing the basic access upon which our true welcome can be built. And it will be a delight every time I see that sign right across from my office, reminding me of Roberta and Lee Jones, reminding me that kinship doesn't require blood kin, reminding me that we are upheld by all of the ways we look for connection, deep family connection, far beyond our relations, and reminding me of all the places we can find it. Reminding me that beholding stretches back and beholding stretches forward, and beholding is the way we build the world we dream about, where all can thrive in beautiful entanglement, cared for and whole. And so today, as we celebrate the birthday of this beloved community, I am feeling delight. Not because there isn't so much sorrow and harm in the world, but because of all the ways our lives are so beautifully entangled. I am delighted every time I see us holding each other up, beholding one another with meals and hugs and hope and help. I am delighted by the joy and care of our children, by the kinship of our elders. I am going through this life, living it together with you, just in a frequent state of delight because we behold each other. So happy birthday to us, beholding each other. And may we celebrate many, many more. And our final hymn for this morning is one that has been in every UU hymnal across the history of our tradition. It is one I have also sung to my children as a lullaby, one that speaks of delight and praise for all the blessings of our lives, and the one I made the typo on in the order of service. So it is not 123, it is number 21. Please turn in your gray hymnals to number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth, a hymn our ancestors have sung across hundreds of years, a hymn that we will sing today with many updated words, including a change I'd like to invite you to make as you sing. In the interest of what we now understand of gender inclusion, I invite you to change the phrase brother, sister to sibling, cousin, so that we may sing today an updated version of the words our ancestors have sung for many years. I invite you to rise or remain seated as you're most comfortable. I've told the story many times before that when our founders were saving money to build the sanctuary in which we now sit, they planted beautiful trees all along the edge of our property and cared for them devotedly. There was no neighborhood yet here, no utilities, and so they hauled water in buckets, stretched to this edge of their town at the time to keep those trees alive for us. I can think of no better story about the power and beauty of stewardship. We very literally here sit in the shades of trees we did not plant, but which were planted and tended and stewarded by ancestors who built and dedicated and funded this community so that it would be here for us, a source of connection, inspiration, and hope. It is out of that legacy that every week we are invited into a time of gratitude and generosity as a part of our worship, as a spiritual practice, that we care for this community and all we hold dear by sharing our gifts with one another. In a moment, I will invite you into stewardship as an offering for the works of our community and the partners that we share with in our Faith to Action program. Every month, we have a Faith to Action partner who receives half of all of the offerings for that month. And this month's Faith to Action partner is the Minority Men's Network, which supports the educational formation of African American students in Columbia with a necessary and important scholarship fund. And we will now hear a little bit more from Wiley Miller, a member of their board, about their essential work and what your gifts will support this morning. If you prefer to give online or by text, please do see your order of service for details. And after Wiley speaks with us, our ushers will circulate about the sanctuary during another special musical offering from one of our young people. Thank you, Wiley.
Good morning, all. It's been approximately 160 years since we ended slavery in this country. And since that time, we've been attempting to overcome that tragic episode in our history. Sometimes we've done reasonably well. At other times, we've done horribly poorly. Such an incident of our poor response we all just witnessed down in Memphis, Tennessee. I could say a lot about that alone, but I'll save that for another time. It takes a lot to overcome the history of slavery in this country. It takes quite a lot. And we still have a very long way to go in order to bring about a reconciliation of that period. There are many things that need to be done. The Minority Men's Network is a group of mostly men, professional men of African descent, but not totally. So if some of you are not people of African descent and wish to become a part of the Minority Men's Network, we are open to you. And some European Americans have indeed taken advantage of that offering. We attempt to be of service to the Columbia community, Boone County community. And one of the things that we do in our effort to be of service is that we offer scholarships. Education is one of the pathways out of this terrible legacy of slavery. And African Americans in this country who have been exposed to education tend to fare a lot better than those who have not. We attempt to increase the number of young people from this community who can take advantage of higher education. We give typically 4 scholarships per year, 1 to each of the high schools in the area. Sometimes we have more than 1 candidate from 1 school who qualifies so well for our scholarship that we have to give more than 4. And that happened this past year. We had to give 2 at Rockbridge High School and 1 to the remaining 3 high schools. This magnificent congregation has assisted the Minority Men's Network for quite some time. I haven't counted the years, but at least 15 to 20 years. And your help has been most appreciated by the network. It helps us provide the scholarships that we offer. They are $2,000 scholarships each. We started out many years ago offering $500 as a scholarship. And of course, the world has changed since then. And we increased our scholarship to $1,000. And about 5 years ago, we increased it to $2,000. We will have to increase again, I know, and we will. But we need resources in order to provide the scholarships that we give. And it is contributions like the ones you give to us that allow us to make those scholarships available to the young African American people in this community. So we thank you very much. We thank you for what you've done in the past. We thank you for what you are doing for us this month. And we encourage you to give to the best of your ability to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. We are beholding one another, entangled up in a delightful web of humanity. Let us go and live as though it is so. Let us go in blessing and be a blessing to a world that needs our care. I invite you to sing our benediction, rising or remaining seated as you are able.